Welcome, welcome. We are so glad to have you all join us. And as folks are continuing to come in for our webinar tonight, we are joined by our partners and friends from the Legal Empowerment and Advocacy Hub, the Detroit Justice Center, and the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative. And we have a lot of wonderful and wise people on our panel today who will get to introduce themselves shortly. My name is Kat Walden. I use she, her, and her pronouns. I am the membership coordinator at Law for Black Lives, and I am currently located in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I am a light-skinned Black woman wearing a cream-colored shirt with some frizzy, humid hair and gold hoops. And I have a light gray background behind me with some plants and my washer and dryer. And so tonight's conversation, we will understand the role of jailhouse lawyers and their work on the inside fighting for justice. And it will delve into how that work connects to those on the outside who are also using their skills and lived experiences all in service of creating thriving communities. And so through this collective labor, we hope to give you insight and energy into how to break the cycle of incarceration and ultimately abolish and liberate our people from these oppressive, punitive, and exploitive systems. So we encourage you to use the chat to ask questions, to engage in conversation with each other, and we'll have time for question and answer at the end of our discussion. And as a friendly reminder to our panelists, we have Anthony and Candace with us tonight who are going to provide ASL interpretation. So please be mindful of your talking speed. And if you're going a little fast, we may ask you to slow down. And I am now going to hand it over to Eric from the Detroit Justice Center, who will be moderating tonight's conversation. So Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me okay. My name is Eric Williams, he, him pronouns. I am the managing attorney for the economic equity practice of the Detroit Justice Center. I'm a brown-skinned Black man with lots of gray hair and a gray beard and round glasses, sitting in a gray room with lots of stuff behind me, but most prominently a banner with a big Maze M on a blue background, coming as I am from Detroit. I am happy to be here with all of you. The work I do at the Detroit Justice Center is, our work is focused on, oddly enough, creating a more just city. And the truth is that one can't hope to create a just city, much less a just society, without first addressing the impact of incarceration on both those incarcerated and the communities to which they return. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the, well, a lot about the work that is being done in this area. I'm joined by a number of really good people, some close, some not so close, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. Why don't we begin with Jody Polk, coming to us from Gainesville or thereabouts, Florida.
Thank you so much, Eric. My name is Jody Polk, and I am the founder and president of the Legal Empowerment and Advocacy Hub, which we call LEA. LEA is the home of the National Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative, which I started as a 2018 Soros Justice Fellow. I am adorned in jewelry that I have made. My shirt says, "Each of us is more than anything that we have done," which is a quote by Brian Stevenson. And behind me, you see the powerful lion of the tribe of Judah, which I identify with. So I'm excited to be here. I'm a community peace builder, legal empowerment practitioner, and a formerly incarcerated jailhouse lawyer.
Thank you very much, Jody. Thrilled to have you here. Always fun talking to you. I've got some people who are a little closer to home. I'd like to pass it on to Sonia, if you want to give a brief introduction here.
Hello, my name is Sonia Bonnet. I am a community legal advocate at the Detroit Justice Center. My work focuses on helping people navigate legal circumstances where they do not necessarily need a lawyer. I would consider us very close to jailhouse lawyers, except we are heavily in the community and not incarcerated. I am a light-skinned Black woman with curly hair. I won't say whether it's mine or not. I have on a black shirt, some glasses, and in a blue and white room. I thank you, Eric.
All right, Sonia, and going a little further away, I believe, to Upper East Side, we have Clarence Green. If you be kind enough to let the good folks know who you are and how you look.
So everyone knows my name. That's unnecessary, right? Okay. I am a jailhouse lawyer with a member of the JLI, which is the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative. I have a paralegal certificate, currently a student at Berkeley in the legal studies program, which is a bachelor's degree program. I've helped people with their cases in criminal, civil law. I'm also into environmental law, particularly air and water quality. I'm a brown skinned Black man. I have a burgundy polo long sleeve shirt on. I have oval Versace eyeglasses on. I have a kid and play haircut. And as everyone knows, I'm from Upper East Side, Manhattan, but I'm originally from Brooklyn, born and raised. And behind me is the door to my spot with a nice towel that I've sprayed. This perfume is called 1,000 Kisses or something like that. I like the smell of that. A friend of mine, she bought it at, I called it Bath Body, whatever. I don't know anything about this because I'm formerly incarcerated and I'm just out only a year and some change. So I'm learning everything. It's like I'm learning life all over again. So, if I threw people for a loop, whatever, but I'm new to everything out here. So
that's all right. We definitely appreciate your input. I mean, that's first and foremost. And we're happy to have you here. Lived for 15 years in East Flatbush myself. So there you go. And last but certainly not least, again, closer to my home, Lauren Thomas.
Hey y'all, I'm Lauren Thomas. I'm a community legal advocate from the Detroit Justice Center. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am, just like Sonia said, we do a lot of legal work that you don't necessarily need a lawyer for. And we also spend a lot of time encouraging our community and our neighbors to advocate for themselves and how to do that, which I'm sure we're going to talk more about. I am in a hot pink room right now underneath Black and white pictures of Ella Fitzgerald and Zora Neale Hurston. I'm a light-skinned Black woman with blonde locks and a floral shirt.
All right, well, thank you. Those are our panelists. I believe. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jody.
Thank you, Eric. So before we get started with our conversation tonight, I wanted to really just set a visual of legal empowerment and how we are using legal empowerment to be able, as a form of abolition, but as well as how legal empowerment ties to the cycle of incarceration. And so many of us are very aware of the statistics that we know so well in the United States of over 2 million people being incarcerated annually, raising that number to 6 million or more when we add in community control and other forms of incarcerations outside of just jails and prisons. But I was very shocked to find out 3 years ago, in 2019, the Justice Task Force, which is a part of the global legal empowerment movement, published some data that showed that 5 billion people globally, 2/3 of the world's population, don't have meaningful access to justice. And so in 2018, when I became a Soros Fellow, and was really forming the foundation of the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative to be able to bring a lot of my skills that I learned on the inside home, as well as to be able to seek my own position inside of the legal practice, as a justice impacted person. I had the ability to travel to Budapest, where I attended a 5-day legal empowerment webinar hosted by NAMATI, the Global Legal Empowerment Network, which I am proud to be one of their board directors. Also hosted by the Bernstein Institute for Human Rights at NYU and OSF. And at that seminar, over 60 legal practitioners and leaders from over 10 countries, I was the only justice impacted person there, learned about legal empowerment. And although I learned the language of legal empowerment at the training, I had witnessed legal empowerment day in and out as a jailhouse lawyer during the 7 years of incarceration that I spent on an 8-year sentence. And so legal empowerment, and I really encourage you all to do some research on, we'll hit on some things tonight, but legal empowerment is not a program or a process or one solution. Legal empowerment is a framework that recognizes that people must know the law, identify with it in order to practice, use it, and shape and transform the law. And so through transforming the law, we're able to not just be a part of systems, but we're actually able to hold these systems accountable and bring these systems closer to home and really live lives that are rooted in justice. Legal empowerment includes methods that are rooted in participatory research, participatory action. It is rooted in co-created solutions, as well as partnerships between lawyers, movement lawyers, and community members who may be vulnerable or at risk to be able to work together in a shared power, shared knowledge type of way. So a lot of the effects or the impact of legal empowerment lasts long beyond someone winning a court proceeding or someone being victorious inside of the justice system through participatory and legal empowerment resources and approaches. We're also able to see these impacts last for generations and to actually live in community with people and not outside. One of the methods that I really wanted to just highlight inside of the legal empowerment movement is the idea of community paralegals. Like Clarence, I also have my certification inside of paralegal studies. But what I learned about community paralegals abroad and what you're going to see tonight and hear a little bit about inside of our conversation is how community paralegals are being used. Community members who live in those communities, are from those communities, have legal knowledge and actually work hand in hand. Community organizer and legal practitioners coming together to be able to support people in getting their justice needs solved, as well as empowering people to think about and own and process their own justice needs. And so at the Legal Empowerment Advocacy Hub, we definitely recognize legal empowerment as a form of abolition. When we think about incarceration, we typically think about jails and prisons. But as a justice impacted Black woman from Florida, I can tell you that incarceration doesn't start with just police and jails. Incarceration starts in communities, in neighborhoods, and homes. Incarceration is so much deeper than just jails and prisons. And through the community, we go through that justice system, right? All the way through, and then we re-enter back into community. So I've been proud over the past 7 years of being home from after incarceration to learn about and to be partners with organizations like Detroit Justice, organizations like Participatory Defense, where community organizers who are not lawyers are working directly with family members of incarcerated people to be able to be inside of the pretrial space. And then to also recognize that jailhouse lawyers, legal workers who are incarcerated on the inside, who assist other incarcerated community members, because incarcerated people are community members who left community through incarceration and hopefully will return, reintegrate back into those communities. And like Clarence said, a lot of times we think about jailhouse lawyers as just post-conviction criminal, but jailhouse lawyers actually supports every area of legal needs. Just because a person's incarcerated doesn't mean that they are, that they don't have, legal identity and that those needs don't come up. So for a lot of our jailhouse lawyers at JLI, they're serving life sentences. And through the legal empowerment of jailhouse lawyers, community members like myself, for the first time, really get to understand inside of prison, unfortunately, how the law actually intersects with our lives on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm excited to join this conversation today. I know a lot of times when we talk about the justice system, we talk about courtrooms and we talk about jails and we talk about prisons. But tonight, in addition to talking about jailhouse lawyering and looking at the prison system, we're going to also look at how legal empowerment shapes communities before and after incarceration. So what does it look like for not just someone like me and Clarence on the inside doing the work, but also to be joined like Lauren to see what it looks like when we are supporting our community members right in our own neighborhoods. And so legal empowerment is so much more. And I hope we get to recognize that in this conversation than criminal justice. I like to think that legal empowerment decarcerates justice, because in addition to criminal justice, or even before criminal justice, we should have healthy protections of the law that protects us in health, education, community, and my body and my mind. And so with that, I am excited to turn it back over to Eric and to take a journey through a conversation of how legal empowerment can and does and is impacting communities, not just in the justice system, but in our communities and in our lives as well.
Thank you, Jody. And I have to say that this is interesting for me because I grew up the west side of Detroit, and I had one view of the world in our justice system, then went to law school and acquired a very different one, and they are frequently in conflict. But as I listen to you, and I know how Lauren and Sonia have thought about this, one of the things I'm curious about is, as you look at our system, our legal system, both how it impacts those who are incarcerated and those who have been able to come back to their communities, where do you see the shortcomings? Right, I'd like to get a feel for, where do you see the shortcomings in our system as far as how it serves those who are currently incarcerated, those who have come back to their community, and a bit of how what you do addresses those shortcomings. So start with Clarence, if you don't mind. I'd like to hear from your perspective, both during incarceration and afterwards, your idea of where the shortcomings are in the system and how your current role, you're able to address those.
Well, from my experience on both sides, the way that I was able to help people currently and today is by using the legal skills that I have to help them put together moving applications in their cases or a personal, like family, you know, also giving advice about what to do in a particular situation. For instance, there's one person now who he has a sentence of 48 to life, and we correspond through emails. They have the tablet, and I told him, because he has like 31 years in on his case, I say go for clemency, because in New York State, a number of people have received clemency over the years. Within the past maybe 3 or 4 years, you had, I don't know, 100 people receive clemency. One of them being David Gilbert, who was a political prisoner, a number of other people. And so for this particular individual that I was giving advice, I said to him, look, I'll contact some people. I'll give you the proper information and everything. And you set your paperwork up for the clemency and put it in. Put your application in. I'll help you as much as I can. This translates into the community in the sense that people that have clemency already, they're in the community and they're advocating for the same thing. How does, I think I forgot part of your question, but how does it help is that you have people like me on this side in free society that are spreading this knowledge that the justice system can work if we use what we know to get the result that we need. And that's pretty much it.
Now, I think the interesting thing about that is, you're giving information to somebody who you'd like to think there's already some sort of process in place for people to get that kind of information, but it seems like it really isn't. It's you having to, sort of bring up and make suggestions about, for example, clemency, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's current today. In these last, like I said, these last 4 or 5 years that I've seen in New York, you may have had about 100 people let go, like clemency, seriously. And most of them I know personally.
Anyone else want to jump in? Actually, as a panelist, can use raise your hand button or something, so I'll know when one of you has something they want to say. But Sonia or Lauren, let's like to hear something about the work you do, since it's sort of on the other side of this process that a lot of your work takes place. Sonia.
Yeah, so speaking to your question about shortcomings, I think the biggest shortcoming is education. So for a lot of legal standpoints or situations that people get into on our side, on the outside, there's usually a legal process for. Let's take, for example, we do appeals every year for people that are losing their homes or in danger of losing their homes in Detroit through foreclosure. The majority of the homes are illegally overassessed, meaning that the city is saying that the house is worth more than it actually is. And usually that's due to, the poor upkeep of abandoned and other homes that people lost due to foreclosure, poor just neighborhoods, period. And these are usually the most impoverished neighborhoods. I myself went through that process. I lost my home But going through it, I did not have the education that there was a process that I could have gone through that would have helped my situation. Not only did I not know there was a process, I didn't know anything about the process. If somebody would have put the paperwork in front of me, I still wouldn't have known what to do. So the biggest shortcoming there is when it comes to legal situations is education, which is what we base our advocacy on, which is educating the community. We work outside of the appeal network on a few things, but whatever we do, we try to heavily educate ourselves first. So that way, when we go in front of the community, we're educated and we're giving them education. Because most of the time, once you equip people with the education on how to better their situations, they're going to use that education and do just that. And we're here to help them navigate those processes. But to your question, the biggest shortcoming of the legal system, of the judicial system, is education, is the fact that we're not educating each other, and the system for sure is not educating us. And we have to take it on as a personal responsibility to educate each other.
I agree, Sonia. And the other part of it, like you were saying, like even with these processes that are already in place, and some of the other, for the property tax appeals process, we've also worked on water shutoffs in the city of Detroit. We're currently assisting the city with expungements in the state of Michigan. We're looking into some eviction defense things. And these are all processes that already exist, but there's paperwork, there's language, and like a legal ease. That's another barrier, right? And so it's like one thing poor people do, or marginalized people do all the time, is fill out paperwork. Always filling out paperwork, always filling out applications, always answering somebody's questions, right? And so to be able to be that bridge of offering the education, offering that that ability for the empowerment and self-advocacy and all of those things, and then putting it in terms that we understand, right? Because I don't have a law degree, you know, so it's important being that bridge in the community, because sometimes lawyers forget how to talk to the community, just as the community, you know, my neighbors don't necessarily understand what the lawyers and these people and these terms and things are saying. What does that mean? So then we can step in and we can almost like translate these things, which are difficult to understand on purpose, right? These are other barriers on purpose. There's a reason that in the city of Detroit, the appeals process was a bit daunting, right? Because if everybody knew about it, then is everybody going to be appealing their taxes? And then the tax burdens go down and less people are paying those over assessed amounts, right? Those barriers are there for a reason. And that's where we're there to help knock them down and talk just like we're doing right now about it.
Really quickly, I wanted to tell Jody, we were also trained by Namati when we started this work. That's where our initial training came from. And just to Lauren's point, meeting people where they are is our specialty. Going into the community and translating whatever garbage the government has put in this foreign language for the community to understand is what we do best. And we do it intentionally, just as intentionally as they made it ununderstandable.
Thank you, Sonia and Lauren. It sounds so much, right? Just like Jailhouse lawyers. I love what Clarence said, because one of the values that when I was incarcerated as a jailhouse lawyer, we had to learn how to use the same laws used to persecute us. We learned how to transform and use those laws to be able to liberate us. And the only other shortcoming I really want to highlight, in addition to the language and access, is the ability to cope with the trauma an emotional just impact of what people are going through, in addition to learning the law. As a jailhouse lawyer, I was also an incarcerated peer, you know, to countless women who were, in addition, fighting her legal criminal case, was dealing with, you know, civil issues and human rights issues. And so there's a very intimate relationship that happens when we as community members, neighbors, are able to share that knowledge and to share the process. And so one of the things I'm also very proud that we're doing to overcome these shortcomings through LEAH is we do also train and work with lawyers in the United States to really, like you were saying, Sonia, talk about communication, talk about shared power, talk about shared knowledge. And we're hoping to be in every law school, hopefully in the next 5 years, but we are also changing those institution spaces into our spaces. We're in those spaces too, and we're shaping the next future lawyers and creating relationships between lawyers and future lawyers with jailhouse lawyers and incarcerated people, so that that cycle is truly infused with all of us. Wherever our people are, we are there too.
I love that. And what I'm getting from this is that a big part of what you're doing is educating people about processes, right? But clearly that's not all you're doing, right? There's the whole notion of empowerment is more than simply getting additional information. There's a lot more actually that comes with that to be able to use that information that you got. And I'd love to hear some of the ways, some of the things that are done aside from just giving people that information, some of the other things that are done in that empowerment process. Anyone who, since the hand raising thing isn't going, you can just feel to jump right in.
Well, I mean, it's two things that came to my mind as Jody was speaking. One is that when Lauren was speaking about education, and Jody kind of like tied in what I'm about to say, I noticed that on my time on the inside and working with people, that some didn't want to come to the law library, or you couldn't talk them into, so you couldn't convince them, so to speak, to come in and let's get you rolling with your case. Because it's frustrating to know that you don't know the legal jargon and you have this time. So some people I met over the years in prison, they just said, forget it, threw all their legal work away, threw all of it, and they just, whatever it was, whether it was 20 to life, whatever it was, you know, they said the law thing is not for me, and that's it. And I kind of looked at that like, I don't think that that's the way to go. But I continue to try to help some way, somehow. I don't know if for some, my efforts were beneficial. Maybe years down the line, I seen where they were into their cases. Some of them had relief and so on and so forth. The other thing I wanted to say is that spreading the information is a form of empowerment, where that information that we have is not known to society, period. And so we have this group, it's called COVID-19 Accountability Working Group. And I am an editor, author, and co-manager of the page with a lawyer, Joe Kuferman, and it's a Facebook page. And during this entire crisis with COVID-19, we have been posting information about every facet of COVID-19 in terms of the vaccine, where it's spreading, how it spread, so on and so forth, who's affected by it, the masks, the types of masks, where to find legal assistance, where to find food, and so on and so forth in the crisis, right? I think that for the people that didn't know, whether you were incarcerated or in free society, that this was a sort of empowerment. It was giving beneficial information, not just to, people, it was giving information to the world, really, because whoever looks at that page, you can see that page all over the world. And so I think for me, that's also my way of empowering the people, providing information where there's sort of like a void, providing information to families that they may have incarcerated loved ones who do not have access to this information, and so many other things. Like one of the things I published on the page was how the prisoners would in one state were not able to receive masks or any protection, any sanitizing or anything, and they went to rioting because the officers kind of like locked them in a block and walked away, so to speak. They said, and some people were in the block were infected, were infected with COVID-19. And so I think that pushing that page with the information that's there, it's a form of empowerment, in form of giving people the information that they need in order to navigate in the crisis that we've gone through and we're still in.
Lawrence or Sonia or Jody? So,
well, if Sonia and Lauren, one of the things I want to lift up that I'm very proud of, when I got out of prison, the only thing I wanted to do was go to law school. I never imagined I'd be doing this work. I just wanted to be a lawyer. And so I live in Florida, but the New York NYU has been the home of the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative for the past 3 years. And we have worked with law students, a organizational group at NYU, EPIC, which is made up of law students, worked with law students with a formerly incarcerated jailhouse lawyers panel, which I'm proud to have Clarence as one of those members in New York. And we've all worked together to redevelop the law clerk training that New York is using to actually train law clerks. And we've included a lot of areas of substance law. We've included mediation practices, peer and healing practices inside of the training. And law students actually go in and teach these classes. And so they get the amazing experience of learning from jailhouse lawyers on the inside. We are also working with NYU that has they have an associate's degree program in some of the prisons in New York. And we are going to be developing a legal studies elective. And so that also gives legal education for the general population to be able to understand legal studies and to have those skills within them. I'm also proud to be partnering with Justice Defenders, which is a group in Africa where incarcerated men and women are getting their law degrees while they are incarcerated, and to see what that looks like inside of the United States. And in addition to that is advocating for human rights, and really love what Clarence said, educating the community, but advocating for human rights. And then just like Lauren and Sonia, modeling every day in my community what freedom looks like. I think a lot of times the language is, poor, marginalized people. But when we're in those communities, we don't use that language. And so every day I use my life as a model of not just what we've gone through, but what we can achieve when we keep in that hope, that Clarence was talking about as well with the education.
I see that actually brings up it brings up an interesting point, right? The support that these kind of initiatives get from law schools and lawyers. But at the same time, I sense, not just from some of the comments in the chat, but also from some of you, that sometimes there's less than wholehearted, sometimes people just aren't feeling lawyers. So I'm curious, right, from a sort of personal experience, what has been your experience with lawyers? Where do they fall short? Because I think the work that gets done by, jailhouse lawyers, by our CLAs, a lot of that's rooted in making up for the shortcomings of people in my profession, right? So the question is, really, what has been your experience with lawyers? Where have there been shortcomings? And how has it been working with them, both on matters directly pertaining to you and in the work that you do now?
I'm gonna probably let Lauren and Sonia answer that, but I just have to say, because I'm biased, I've identified as a lawyer, like that became my identity as someone who interpreted the law, used the law, taught the law while incarcerated. I don't believe in, I'm very aware of the injustice that we face in the world, but I love the law. I have an interest in not just empowering, activating people, but the law to me is the people. So I have had some amazing experiences with lawyers. It has been difficult on a local level, working with public defenders and prosecutors, but we show up. And I mean, we're in there, and so we don't have to be friends. Like Lauren and Sonia was bringing up, this is a procedural process. And so me knowing the law allows me to advocate for the law. And so if any shortcomings, I would say criminal lawyers, right? That we see is not upholding the law in these courtrooms. It seems like lawyers are incarcerated inside of some of these narratives too in the courtroom space, which is, my experience. But I think more than anything, because our communities are isolated communities that exist within these larger functioning communities, I get to bring, as a community member, I get to bring lawyers, first of all, that I trust on a relational level. That's why I have to give you shots out, Eric, since getting to know you, not just a lawyer, strong Black man that I respect and admire. And so when we make those relationships, as someone in community like Lauren and Sonia, I can be a door opener to be able to welcome that lawyer into a space where, like you said, he or she may not typically have gone into. Because me and Clarence are the gatekeepers, but at the same time, I treat people the way I want to be treated. And we show up and we make sure that lawyers remember what the law is sometimes.
Woo, Jody.
Right.
I love so much of what you just said, especially, the law is the people, right? We work with amazing lawyers at the Detroit Justice Center. Like some of the most amazing people that I've ever met that just happen to be lawyers, right? I think to the question though, some of the shortcomings or the disconnect is going to look very much like we get a lot of lawyers and law students who are not from here. And when I say from here, I mean, I'm at Finkel and Greenfield, right? And on the west side of Detroit. So, and it's that doesn't mean that they can't help, right? But there is sometimes a language barrier, right? And there's sometimes just this idea of not understanding what we're talking about, because these are people, right? So nobody has to explain to me what it's like to have your husband incarcerated, because I've been that person, right? So I know what that looks like. Nobody has to explain to Sonia what it looks like for a government to take your home from you illegally and say that it was legal, right? So starting with where we are, these wonderful initiatives, Jody, that you're talking about with, like, you know, educating people and making the people, you know, arming the people who are already affected with these tools, right? That's more valuable that I've seen than it is doing it the opposite way. The people who already have some arms and some tools, now teaching them what it's like to be in this neighborhood, or teaching them what it's like to lose something that's this kind of valuable to you, right? With the fear of never getting it back. So I think that working that way is the forward way, working with the people, working with like I said, the people that are already affected, instead of doing it the backwards way, right? Those still valuable. We've had amazing interns, amazing law students at like every turn. Again, it's just that those are different roles. They have to be different roles.
I'm a change that up just a little bit. Yes, the lawyers at DJC are amazing, but there's a difference. We talking about movement lawyers, right? We talking about lawyers that are for the cause. Prior to this, I had, you know, them free lawyers you get when you're being evicted or when you've been in jail and you got to see the judge, and they were not so wonderful. They didn't know my name. They met me in the hallway for 10 minutes. They did not fight for my case. They fought to get to the next case. So I think that when we talk about lawyers, there are these two groups, right? Because also prior to me getting into the movement, I had no idea that there were lawyers in school and out here that actually cared about the community and wanted to see the law change, because I had never encountered them. And that is what the community is facing. The community are not dealing with lawyers like Eric or the lawyers we work for or the lawyers you all have experienced. They dealing with the lawyers that got 200 caseloads and they're just trying to get to the next one because they wore out and they tired, and you're just another body in the courtroom to them. Their shortcomings are too wide and too far to even, we don't have time to discuss it on this particular Zoom. But when we talk about lawyers and the good and the bad, we got to separate them. There's this beautiful movement now, right? Where we got these beautiful people fighting for our cause, actually trying to learn from the community and teach the community. And then there's this other group of lawyers that people like ourselves experience on a daily basis. When you got caught on a gun charge or a drug charge, or you're being evicted, or you're losing your children to the Child Protective Services, those lawyers that the poorest communities are interacting with are not the lawyers you and I see every day. There are lawyers that are not treating them human. There are lawyers that are not treating their case like, you know, we've got to get some justice for these people, because sometimes these are lawyers who ain't in it to see the system be broken down and redone the right way. Sometimes they in it for the money. Sometimes they just wore out. So when we talk again, when we talking about lawyers, let's separate it into two groups, because these people still exist. And the poorest communities are still having to interact with them on a daily basis. And their shortcomings, too far and too wide.
So I thank you. That's actually, you know, sometimes when you ask people about the legal profession, what you get is not always something you feel comfortable hearing, right? And a lot of it is deserved. But the thing that stands out is when you all were talking about the work you do and how you're able, you know, when you talk about uplifting and empowering folks, the enthusiasm all of you feel really comes through, right? But as Clarence mentioned, there are some people who don't, you know, when presented with that same opportunity, they aren't able to muster that same thing. So I'm curious, what motivates you? Where does that, you know, that just like fire inside that makes you want to do the work you do? I mean, I know where mine comes from, right? The work I do, you know, you talk about you're all over on, you know, Finkel and Greenfield. I'm 6 Mile and Hubble, right? It's just, right around the block. So I know where mine comes from. I have family incarcerated, but for you, where does it come from? Because it's not just having been in the circumstance yourself, because lots of people who have been don't move on from that. So oops. So where's it coming from you? Clarence, did you want to
Oh, yes,
jump in
yes.
on it?
Excuse me. For me, it's internal, it's deeply rooted, and I just said no more, like, because so many times that I've been done wrong illegally, so much injustice has been done to me that I said no more. An example, as like when we were talking about when Jody mentioned like a defense attorney, and Lauren too, and the brother and the sister Sandra. What happened to me is that and give you some detail. In my case, there was a dying declaration, and the victim didn't say I did the harm to him. He identified clearly someone else. The defense attorney that I had, we went to trial, he didn't even use this statement, and he had it in his possession. But I didn't know about this until, I don't know, 7 years later when I'm upstate serving a life sentence. So when I finally received the statement, I sent it to him with a letter asking him, did you have this in your possession? And he said, yes, he wrote back in the letter, he said, yes, I did have it, and I sent you a copy. Wow. So no more. Like, that was my position, because at that time, all right, so I was convicted. I was locked up in January 1991. I was convicted in 1992. So here it is, we're in like 1997, 98. I'm doing a post-conviction motion in my case. And he tells me this. Now, this was supposed to be the smoking gun, ineffective assistance of counsel, what have you, dying declaration, I'm innocent, what have you, right? But his way out of that is saying that, well, I gave that to you during the trial. So now for me, that would be a no issue, because they're saying, well, you had it, you knew about it, and you didn't do anything with it. So for me, it was just no more. It was so many injustices that occurred to me personally that I no more. I'm fighting.
That's the right attitude.
For me, go ahead, Sonia.
You sure?
Yeah.
For me, it was not even my personal circumstance of losing my home to the city that kind of lit this fire, because I had always been doing advocacy work in my community. I just hadn't really realized it yet. It was the thought of it happening to other people. It was looking at my neighborhood and looking at my taxes, looking at all the burnt out houses and the schools not having toilet paper, and thinking, I'm being taxed for what again? And it was also the babies, like thinking about the fact that if I didn't get up and fight, if I didn't get up and do something, they're just going to continue to experience it. And also, I think to do any of this kind of work, you've got to have a love-hate relationship with the law, right? So part of you has got to love a little bit of the law to do this. And the part of you definitely hates, I wouldn't even say the law, I would say the system. But the law, I love how fickle it is, how everything about it makes sense to some degree. As a child, I wanted to be a lawyer, but my views got tainted, through hardship. However, I still had that deep-rooted love for the law in there. Again, love, hate, but definitely some kind of love for the law you have to have outside of personal circumstance to do this kind of work.
Jody?
For me, I have to say, first started off when I came home, I wanted to be a lawyer. To be honest, I wanted to be a prosecuting attorney. I wanted to be in the system. I wanted to affect change, or to at least be on the inside. When I think about incarceration, I see it as a cycle. We see people fighting from the outside. I wanted to fight from the inside. Over the last 7 years, I have to say I have a brother that identifies as a woman that is serving a 30-year mandatory sentence in the Florida Department of Corrections. Also, because I want to be safe. I'm from the South, and I'm born in the 80s. I have tattoos. I have a car on 28-inch rims. I like my music loud. My brother have gold teeth. My son have wicks. Like, my life, which I love and value, is criminalized. And so I need to make sure that I'm safe to be myself everywhere, all the time. And I'll never forget the amount of men and women with life sentences, the amount of women with life sentences inside of prisons. And so those are my teachers. They have been my educators. They've been my heroes. And so when I think of my greatest hope of transforming, abolishing the justice system is really in and rooted in incarcerated legal workers and incarcerated community members coming back on the outside. I've been in there, and I know the power that exists inside of those prisons and inside of the people. So I'm going to always do all that I can to highlight folks like Clarence, and to make sure that we have more Sonias and Laurens in Florida, in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Cali, across this country, because it's through the power of the people that I do feel like we'll be able to have freedom and peace that we all imagine.
So I got in this work, this particular work, I was a housing advocate before I came to DJC, and I was a housing advocate for one particular reason: Black women. Housing crises affect Black women the most. You know, at the time, I've been a single mother for the past 5 years myself, and I know what housing insecurity looks like, what it feels like personally and surrounding me. And I know that it does not have to be that way. I believe that, like, legally and spiritually and all of those things. So like my advocacy and the things that really motivate me, I've been surrounded by amazing Black women my entire life, from the second I was a little mustard seed in my mama before then, when she was one in her mama. And so I have been surrounded with that kind of greatness. And it's just, you know, it's the next step for me is to make sure that we are taken care of. And if I have the ability to assist with that, then I'm going to make sure that then that is what happens. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely, and I have the benefit actually of seeing you and Sonia in action pretty much every day. So I know how dedicated and focused you are. I'd love to hear from all of you sort of some of the things you're working on right now. Right? I mean, we've spoken a bit in abstract and sort of abstracts, but sort of nitty gritty. What kind of things are you working on now in your day to day? Any? Clarence, I'll start with you real quick.
So again, I've been working on one of the individuals I correspond with, trying to gather information and assist him with his clemency. All the time, on an every day-to-day basis, I provide information to people, whether it's inside or outside. Um, I want to be more active in the legal field, but it's just the things that are going on now. I have to work with what's happening now to get. So sometimes you want to be here in one place, but sometimes you have to go through different channels in order to reach that place. So it's not necessarily a detour, it's sometimes like a stepping stone. And so I'm helping where I can, but mostly I'm helping myself navigate the world out here at large. So that's the truth.
Hey, 2020 and 2021, I think we all kind of know the difficulties that come with that. This last 2 years, and no matter where
Right.
you are, that's kind of been no joke.
Right.
Sonia or Lauren, I know what you've been doing, but not everyone watching this does.
So before I talk about exactly what we're doing now, I do want to give a shout out to our third team member of the Community Legal Advocates from DJC, Chris, who is formerly incarcerated himself. He's a hardworking man, and he's at his other job right now. And Chris is just awesome to work with. And he really wished he could be here. Like, he was really disappointed that he was going to miss this conversation, because his perspectives are always so enlightening and eye-opening. And he really reminds us often like to stay on track, and like that purpose driven issues and things. But currently, so we've got our hands in a few different things that are kind of different. So I did mention earlier, we are kind of like a middle piece for the City of Detroit's Clean Slate program, which is a part of Michigan's newest expungement law, which is recently also been altered again. It's constantly, it's like a moving target kind of. So we're like the middle piece for that. The City of Detroit currently has, I think it's 5,000 applicants to process, and that is just from April for expungement. So that's exciting. And then in a whole other vein, we are working with Eric in the economic equity practice at DJC on community land trust. And I'm so excited about that personally, because we get to see a different model of housing, a different model of anti-gentrification like efforts, like in real time, something that is community rooted, people rooted, and it's a very new concept to me. So I've been very eager to learn about that and work on the community piece of that. And then Sonia, we got some other stuff. What else?
I've been doing a lot of public speaking. We are also with the community amid the Coalition for Property Tax Justice, which is this pretty big coalition that is rooted in keeping folks in their home in Detroit, specifically Black folks. Detroit is an 85% Black city. So I've been doing a lot of public speaking with them. I've been speaking with students and in forums and things, just trying to get out there what is going on in one of the last chocolate cities. Trying to think of other stuff. I do want to also give Chris Delgado another props. He is working diligently on the expungement piece that we're involved in. He has been submerged in that, so we thank him for that. And we are also, Clarence, just kind of wherever people need us to be. Through the pandemic, we handed out grants to returning citizens, grants that were given to United Way and an organization here called CEO. We were able to put funds into people who had came home in the last 5 years to do whatever they pleased with, and that felt amazing. So wherever we're called no matter if we're swamped and busy. If the need is great, we hop in wherever we can. We work with and gave information out for the flood that happened in Detroit, for illegal evictions that were happening here with police, where the eviction moratorium was in place, but police were going to being paid to put people out of their homes. We hopped onto that, even though we were swamped with other stuff. So just like Brother Clarence, wherever we're needed, we're gonna hop in there. So we always have a ton of stuff going on, but if something comes up that is important to the movement and important to the community, we hopping right on it.
Jody?
For me, I've been exclusive on sabbatical. So if anybody's watching this, will watch this. I'm doing okay. I've been like low key behind the scenes. I've changed my phone number off social media. So check me out at leahforjustice.com. But what I'm doing, I'm getting my Kourtney Kardashian, Kylie Jenner on, working on my body, doing yoga, Pilates, really learning astrology and tarot, taking care of myself, being a mom. This is my first time I've been home for 7 years. First time I felt like a mom. First time I've had affordable housing that feels like a home and feels safe. So I'm a community member. I'm like a citizen right now. But in addition to in New York, we were successful in developing that curriculum for jailhouse lawyers. And so I'm excited that we have been invited to New Jersey to now start working in New Jersey to also help redevelop and reconstruct the law clerk program, jailhouse lawyer, program inside of New Jersey, as well as we are doing the research to be able to finally get the opportunity to start or restart this work here inside of Florida. So I'm excited to say I have a team now. I'm not a lone wolf, in that we are working together, which gives me time to focus on the things that I need to focus on. In addition to spreading that curriculum at the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative, we're also working with different partners to be able to provide human rights toolkits, narrative toolkits to jailhouse lawyers across the country, so that people don't have to wait until we're in their state to develop, or redevelop these longer programs. We're consistently communicating, learning from jailhouse lawyers, and then working with, like lawyers from Law for Black Lives, NLG, students, to make sure that jailhouse lawyers have the support that they need. My brother did just beat attempted murder trial in Florida after being on bail for 2 years. And so I don't have the capacity anymore to provide the emotional support for participatory defense. So I'm changing that up. And so in my community locally, what I'm doing is really teaching the law to youth, and to create resources as well as information, like Lauren was saying earlier, that's understandable for community members to really start also knowing and using the law. So my goal is to one day create a community law school. So I'm doing those things, in small chunks. So I'm organizing this legal empowerment movement. I do support Sustainable Development Goal 16, peace and justice for all and healthy institutions. And so I consider myself to be a global organizer, really bringing the lives of people inside, but as well as bringing a lot of global practices and methods and relationships, as well as nationally, trying to find the space to bring us all together so that we can really achieve what we want to from the inside out.
So we've got about 3 minutes left, but there's one thing I'd like to know. I'm going to give you each an opportunity to respond. This work is hard, right? I've actually been, I've spoken to colleagues, both lawyers and non-lawyers, after, a hearing, and they're in tears from the emotional work that goes into the actual work, right? It's not something that's easy. So I'm curious if each of you could give me one thing you do that goes towards self-care, because the truth is you can't keep grinding day in, day out, day in, day out, and think you can do that indefinitely. Now, I think we got a feeling of kind of what Jody's doing for self-care. I'm not mad at you. Let's hear. We have a time for. Let me hear one thing from each of you that you do towards that. Lauren, you want to start us?
Okay, I'll start. I do a lot of self-care. I don't do just one thing. I enjoy self-care like a lot. I work, I got kids. I got one in college that's stressful, like on its own, all the way to a kindergartner. I love them. They're beautiful. They're kings. But so I love television. I think sometimes with this question, like we think of these like, oh, I don't do yoga because I don't like that feeling on my, I don't like that, but I do work out and stuff. But I watch television. I watch a fair amount of television. I read a lot too, but I watch television a fair amount with a nice drink occasionally and junk food. I'm junk food and TV, self-care. There we go.
All right, so
Sonia?
I have always struggled with this question because I think, like Lauren said, I always think of these big things people do, go to spas and yoga and stuff that I don't do. So I guess I could say I watch TV. I can't say junk food because I beat myself up about that. I get my hair done. Y'all can attest to that. Y'all gonna see me in something different all the time. So I'm gonna have to add that to it. I watch TV and I get my head together. So
yeah. All right, Clarence.
briefly, in short, self-care, as they say, I like to groom myself at least all the time, right? That's self-care. I just enjoying my freedom. One of the things I do for self-care is at least once a week, I just go on one of my sightseeing tours. So much to see in New York City, in Midtown and Soho and all these different parts of Manhattan. So I've been to like Governor's Island, Liberty Island. I've been across the ferry, Staten Island, so many different, and I'm just naming a few, but there's many more. So I think that for me, that's the self-care that makes me feel good about myself and help me continue to move on and carry on with the things that I do in terms of advocacy and.
Okay. So we have time now for, wait, Jody, do you think you covered it, or is there anything else in your self-care box we didn't get to?
I apologize a lot. And so because I'm myself, right? And I'm learning how to say no. And I love what you said, Sonia, like it's not always up. I know people get the excited side, but I experience all of my emotions right then and there. So apologizing and just being okay with being angry, being okay with being hurt, being okay with being great. Like I own my emotions, whether they change 40 times in an hour or if they change 4 times a day.
All right. I mean, that actually is probably something more of us need to do, regardless of the field we're in, right?
If I may add, Eric.
Yeah, please.
Something just came to my mind. Choosing the environment and the people who are productive, that I can say is a form of self-care, because it allows you to exercise your mind and expand. And the topic may be about social justice. It may be about children. It may be about family or a job or what have you. But choosing the right environment and the right people to, for these types of dialogue is that I believe is a form of self-care that I engage in, and pretty much I know that all of us, one time or another, we engage in these type of activity, and it sort of becomes a relief to us.
I think it's I'm a big fan of positive energy, right? Because I tend to be a negative person, sort of professionally. That's kind of what I'm obligated to do, right? I'm always sort of envisioning worst case scenarios. So positive energy, being around people who have positive energy, and sometimes just being able to give yours to somebody else, that is, yeah, that when you can muster it, that feels good. I like this discussion because I see a lot of the work or a lot of what motivates my work in everyone there. And I hope one of the things everyone takes away from this is that your profession doesn't limit your ability to impact your community, right? It just does not. There is always space. The more you are willing to commit to it, the more you're willing to learn yourself, the more you're willing to expend the energy to pass on to others, the greater that impact can be. Well, the first thing I want to do is make sure I thank everyone, all the panelists for their contribution, for giving us some insight into what they do and how they do it. We had a few questions. I don't actually, let me look and see if they were answered. Let's see, movement lawyers. Well, actually, there's a question about movement lawyering. The question from Ada Fitzgerald, what kind of work are they doing, and some specific ways that they are doing lawyering right. I don't know about doing lawyering right, but I can certainly say this as someone who is a movement lawyer. A big part of what we do, a big part of my work involves our community legal advocates. I mean, Sonia and Lauren are a big part of my team, and the work that we do sort of ranges from helping people get over the existing barriers to full participation in community land trust. So everything from helping folks get licenses and permits when it comes to entering a particular profession, helping people create community land trusts to get around the fact that it's really difficult for some folks in Detroit, really Black folks in Detroit, to get a mortgage. We help people with foreclosures and expungement. This is the work we do. In a lot of cases, though, our work isn't guided so much by an individual client. It's guided by either the community organization that is our direct client, or sort of the community at whole. And as a lawyer, my role isn't to say, no, you shouldn't do this. My role is to listen, hear what the client wants, and then go, okay, this is how we go about doing that, right? And a lot of times what really comes up is that, and I hate to say this, I hope they don't take away my bar card. A lot of times they don't need a lawyer, right? Um, I've had people tell me, for example, that they were in some of the foreclosure hearings, they needed a lawyer. And I'm like, nah, really, y'all don't. My CLAs got it, right? They're out there and they're able to handle it. We movement lawyers are guided by community as opposed to being guided by the dollar or the system or whatever. It's listening to community. So that's where the biggest difference is. I think a lot of it also comes, in order to do movement lawyering, you need people who, whether they are jailhouse lawyers or community paralegals, who are rooted in the community, and so are able to convey to the lawyer things that even the community may not know needs to be taken, needs to be said, right? And I think I think that's a big part of what their role is. And I know, Jody, you aren't active doing that right now because you on sabbatical basically. But is that a role you found yourself playing? Communicating to the lawyer or to lawyers around you what it was that was needed?
Absolutely, because sometimes, like, I have to remind lawyers. I will pull out a Florida statute in a heartbeat or a law, because as a jailhouse lawyer, we read case law, we read the law. I know the law, so a lot of times I have to understand. Like, I understand what the judge or is saying, but reminding lawyers of what that law is, and then also culturally, sometimes the way that lawyers talk to community members, like we go through the process with family members. So if family member need us to show up, at a meeting, and we go through the questions of like, what questions do you have for the lawyer? And so sometimes, like, I've actually, even with my brother, been in there and like had to get like real with the lawyers on respect, communication. I do practice restorative justice, transformative justice. And so a lot of times being conflict resolution mediator and then translator, because like Sonya was saying earlier, Bill, like, I don't want to say no names. So public defenders that I've done some trainings with don't speak the language and the understanding. So sometimes I have to interpret, right, cultural understanding and language, and help them to see how what they may think is a crime could be, a way of life. Or sometimes we see criminal things, but in a community, that might be a resource to get needs met. So definitely translate and hold them accountable, and make sure that, if it's procedural, we definitely make sure that we're asking the right questions.
Important.
Eric, if you don't mind, I'd like to give Ms. Fitzgerald kind of a sum up.
Yes.
Okay.
What the movement lawyers are doing right versus what, right versus wrong, if that's even the right language, is they are listening to the community's story and circumstance versus just listening to their case. They're looking at community members as people versus a docket number. And they're really, really doing that. That's all.
Well, thank you. I want to thank all of you for what has been a really fun and interesting conversation. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. And with that, let me turn this back over to Mika.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, everyone. I didn't introduce myself earlier, but I'm Amika Riali. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the membership director at Law for Black Lives. I'm so grateful that you all were able to join us this evening. I'm grateful for this panel and all of the brilliance and the fire and the energy that you all brought. I would just say that if for those on the call who are still curious about movement lawyering, Law for Black Lives is a movement lawyering shop. We're a network of over 6,000 radical lawyers. DJC also has a squad of movement lawyers. We do a bunch of trainings and CLEs and conversations and webinars about that. So you can go to our website at lawforblacklives.org and find out more. join our list if you haven't. If you are curious about the work that any of the panelists are doing, please feel free to reach out to them, visit their websites, Leah for Justice, Detroit. Is it DetroitJustice.org? Yes. And then I'm missing something. The Jailhouse Lawyers
Initiative is a part of
I'm
Leah.
sorry.
So if you go to Leah, you'll see it.
Exactly. So the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative is also on the Leah website. Thank you for dropping that, Kat. Everyone, please have a good evening. We will post this video if you want to come back to it, if you want to join. And also thank you to Candace and Dr. Anthony for your interpretation services. And with that, I'll say good night. Bye, everyone.